Hello, everyone. I'm so thankful to be here, and I want to thank Miss Priscilla for having me come. I really enjoy my trips out to the west side of the state and getting away from Ann Arbor for a day, so I really appreciate being here. Yes, thank you. And I also want to really thank the youth. You're so inspiring to me. I would have never woken up early on a Saturday and came and sat in front of a public audience and been able to speak. So thank you for sharing your stories and being vulnerable. And I did prepare slides, but I've been really inspired about what's been happening in the conversations with the youth. So if everyone's okay with it, I kind of want to flip the script and talk about what we're doing, but give them a chance and for us to learn about traumatic brain injury from their perspective. If you do want my slides, I'm happy to share them at any point. I have cards with my email also. And as we get started, I'll just talk a little bit about myself and why I'm here. So I'm Abby Bretzin. I am a small town girl. I was a high school athlete where I participated in soccer and I sustained a concussion. And during that time, I was really open to the field of athletic training and sports medicine because I was taken care of by an athletic trainer. And that motivated me to want to go and study athletic training in college. And so I went to the SUNY Cortland, which is a small state school in New York where I studied athletic training and was really learning a lot about multiple head impacts and what the long-term effects of multiple concussions were. And from my undergraduate experiences, it made me want to go and study concussions more. So I found a master's program in Philadelphia at Temple University where I worked as an athletic trainer in 2 high schools in the Philadelphia School District. And I also studied sex differences in head and neck strength. That was a potential reason why males and females sustain concussion differently. And from there, I was like, okay, I don't know anything. I want to learn more and learn more. And so I was inspired to get my doctorate at Michigan State University, who unfortunately lost in March Madness last night, so I'm really sad. But I worked with Dr. Tracy Kovassin at Michigan State, and it really just opened my doors to concussion research overall and really wanting to learn more. I then went back to Philadelphia and studied concussion and worked on a large multi-site study called the Ivy League Big Ten Epidemiology of Concussion Study, where we're studying concussions across all colleges in those 2 campuses or 2 conferences. And so they send us all of our data and we understand and learn about concussion prevention and concussion recovery. And from there, I came to the University of Michigan, where now I'm learning how to improve concussion management, learn from others' experiences about concussion, and work on concussion prevention. So that's a lot about me and where I am, and I'm happy to talk about any of my research findings. But I said the word concussion a lot, and so I want to open it up to our youth panel and say, what does the word concussion mean to you?
When you fall and hit your head.
Fall and hit your head. I'll pass it down.
I just know that I have a friend named Rosie, and she's done so many concussions. And she got it when she was playing soccer, and she got a soccer ball hit her in the head. So I think it's when your head gets hit or whatever. But she experienced memory loss, so I'm sure that's something that probably happens in maybe being confused. And then you have to you can't go to sleep after you get a concussion for a little bit because you might I don't know, go into a coma. Yeah.
Yeah, so 2 things just came up. So you hit your head and you experience symptoms like memory loss. And another thing came up that I wanted to point out that might be a myth for concussion specifically. So we used to have this theory that you should continuously wake someone up and not allow them to sleep throughout the night because of fears of what may happen to them. However, that is a myth that we shouldn't be doing. Sleep is really important for your brain health. There's a whole cleaning pathway that happens through sleep. And so when you have a mild brain injury like concussion, you want to sleep through the night so your brain can go through recovery. If there's some red flags that I could talk about, that's when you would be more in a hospitalized situation with more of a traumatic, severe brain injury, but you do want to get good sleep after the injury happens.
Something I learned about concussion is it mainly happens sometimes with footballers because if they get a lot of impact and they clash their heads a lot. And the reason, another fun fact behind concussions is because of the brain shaking, it causes you to like sometimes lose memory. They do scans on footballers' brains sometimes on donations because of that. It could sometimes cause brain bleeds, concussions, bruise to the brain, stuff like that.
I would just say concussions are just like brain damage or like impact on the brain.
Okay.
I feel like concussions, playing volleyball and being hit with a ball multiple times, but I feel like that feeling is just like after you get hit, it's like okay, you're sitting there, you're a little dizzy at first, but then you're fine. And it's like you don't feel anything until later. Your head starts throbbing really bad.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like because it just caused like very bad headaches and it could really mess with your head.
Concussion, it makes your brain bounce loose, and this is that type of cell signals to each other.
What I think concussion is basically like a very serious headache in my head. And like it just makes you feel busy. I like that.
Yeah, so we heard a lot of terms. The word concussion means to shake. So what happens is there is a head impact or an impact to your body that makes your head move, and the actual brain tissue in your skull is actually moving. And so when that happens, you have these little axons in your brain that shear and stretch and move, and then that creates what's called this neurometabolic cascade, which is a big word for, oh my gosh, energy crisis going on, my body doesn't know what to do and how to react, and now an injury has occurred. And so that head impact or body impact happens that causes the brain to move within the skull. And that can happen from, like we all heard, from things like football, soccer, motor vehicle crash, falling off your bike, getting in a fight with your brother or sister, falling out of your bed. Many different things can happen to cause this brain injury. And so oftentimes we think about it with football, but there's many activities that it can happen from. Some other things that we talked about were signs and symptoms of concussion. So we heard some of them, but I'm going to see, is there any more signs and symptoms you would add to that list after brain injury? Some things we said were memory loss, but what are some other things that might happen? Here, I'll pass it down. Memory loss is one sign or symptom, but what are some other things, signs and symptoms that would happen after a concussion?
Can the audience ask?
Let's have them go first and then we can add on, yeah.
Maybe migraines or loss of sight.
Migraines and loss of sight, yes, those are two big ones.
Throbbing or maybe dizziness.
Yes,
Inability to speak or like ringing in your ears.
yes,
Sometimes strokes or slurred speech.
yes, speech is definitely impacted.
Disorientation, and I think something with your pupils, like you shine a light into your eye, and like the dilation just
Maybe like headache.
Headaches, yeah, that's the number one. 97% of concussions have a headache. Any more signs or symptoms that anyone's heard of or anything that's missing? Vomiting, yes, nausea and vomiting is a really big sign or symptom.
Can they like not walk anymore if they get like a bad concussion?
So she asked if they cannot walk anymore if they get a bad concussion. If you're unable to walk, I would say you have a more severe brain injury than concussion. However, one thing that we do after the injury is we test balance and gait, which means we're seeing how stable you are and off stable and able to hold yourself up. So that is definitely one thing that we look for when we're assessing concussion. Any more signs and symptoms? There's one that I didn't really hear, and Lily, I want to see. Lily is a master's student at Michigan State University, and so when we think of signs and symptoms, what is something that we're missing in this talk?
I don't know. Oh, maybe trouble sleeping?
Trouble sleeping, yeah, that's a good one.
Probably not what you're looking for.
No. This came up in some of the other conversations. What about your mood? Does anything happen to your mood in a brain injury? You get confusion, cranky, moody, more emotional, anxious, nervous, so irritable. These are things that are less common, forgetful. Yeah, these are less common, but they're definitely common within concussion. Also, if you have a pre-existing mood disorder, anxiety, depression, irritability, you may be more likely to experience worse symptoms after getting the brain injury. So that's something that we are always assessing for after the injury happens. Okay, yes. Yes, unstable, yes. So what we definitely do is we're assessing balance and postural control. We're monitoring gait and making sure that you're able to walk on your own and be able to move around and help you if you do get a deficit in stability. Yes. Okay, so we talked about signs and symptoms, and we talked a little bit about gait, but what are some things that clinicians do to assess if you have a concussion or not? Do you need me to repeat the question? Oh, so we talked about signs and symptoms, and so a clinician would ask you about those after an injury happened, but what are some other assessments or tests that clinicians might do if they thought you had a concussion?
Maybe like running.
Running? Yeah. Yeah, they'll assess your physical activity.
Maybe a hearing test or a stability check, like walking.
Yep.
So maybe like a CAT scan to see your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, your memory to see if you know who you are. Like my friend, she didn't even know her age for like 3 hours.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
If you have a concussion, do you need to go to an MRI scan machine?
That is a really good question, and I'll grab the microphone just so everyone can hear me. So she asked, do you need to go into an MRI or scan machine if you have a concussion? And so what we thought about maybe a decade ago is that if you hit your head in any way, you should go to the emergency department and you should get a CAT scan or an MRI. But what we're finding out more recently is that not everyone needs an imaging to know that you have a concussion. The problem with concussion that we have is that there's no structural deformity, meaning that if you had a CAT scan or if you had an MRI, we can't see an injury in your brain. That's why we do things like assess your mood, assess your cognition, assess your gait, look at your pupillary control and if your eyes are contracting and restricting appropriately, because we can't see concussions on imaging in the current tools that we do have. We are trying to move forward in a research field to do more imaging tests to see if there are things that we are currently missing, but we don't need those tests to diagnose a concussion. Yes?
What if a concussion goes untreated?
Ooh, that's a really good question. What if a concussion goes untreated? And I want to open it up to the panel. Does anyone have any thoughts on this topic? What if a concussion goes untreated?
Oh, it's another question.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's our own question. I feel like it probably depends on the severity of the concussion, because maybe it'll get worse. I don't know. Because aren't there different types of like concussions of like severity and stuff like that?
Yes, yeah.
Can it turn into a brain bleed? Can they do that?
So a concussion itself, there's a lot of questions right here, so I want to try to answer them all. So we said, what if you don't have a concussion that's treated? And one answer was they could potentially get worse. And so yes, if you have a concussion and you have symptoms that you're not treating, a lot of people get better, but you could make them worse by not getting them treated. What we do after concussions happen, especially in people that are physically active, is we try to safely reintegrate them back into the activities that they're doing. So we want you spending time with your friends. We want you going out on walks. We want you riding your bike if it's safe. We want you interacting in social media because that's probably how you talk to some of your friends. And so if we isolate you, your headache, your anxiety, those things might get worse. And so we just want to do that in a way that we're monitoring your safety. So that is, if concussions go untreated, they can get worse and then you can have longer term problems. So we want you to seek out appropriate healthcare opportunities and work with clinicians that can get you back on track. There was a question about a brain bleed related to concussion. So a concussion specifically is not a brain bleed. That's a whole nother type of brain injury. Those are the things that you are able to see on a CAT scan. So you are getting imaging to notice that there is bleeding in the brain after a head impact. And those are when some of those big red flags that we talked about, very intense headache, very intense nausea and vomiting, losing consciousness, those are more of the things that if those happen, you would want to seek emergency medical care and get screened by a CAT scan at the ED. Yes? What?
If the concussion is bad enough, can you go into a coma?
If a concussion is bad enough, could you go into a coma? And so what I would say there is we have a spectrum of brain injuries that can occur, and a concussion is a mild form of a brain injury. When we're thinking coma, we're thinking a more severe, a moderate or severe or penetrating brain injury, and that's when we do see those more comatose things happening. Any more specific questions about treatment or screening for the brain injury?
If you have a concussion, do you need to take medication after?
That is a really good question and probably one of the most common questions that parents ask me. If you have a concussion, do you need to take medication after? And me working as an athletic trainer, I say no, because I'm seeing someone right when the injury happens or a couple days after. If I take Tylenol, if I take ibuprofen after it happens, I could be masking my symptoms and hiding them, and then I don't know if they're getting worse and if I need to escalate healthcare options. So if it's shortly after the concussion, I want to see how you're doing without medication. However, if you have more long-term symptoms, like you have a very persistent headache, there are medications that you can be taking that you can work with your healthcare provider. But when it happens within 72 hours after the injury, I would often say no, don't take medications just so we can monitor your progress.
Okay, action.
Yes.
So, how long do the effects of a concussion last? And what happens if you have a concussion and then you get hit in the head again? Will it just get worse? Or?
Yes, those are really good questions. So the first one is, how long do the effects of a concussion last? And so what we typically see is that most people recover from their symptoms within 1 week to 2 weeks after injury. That's where probably 50% of high school aged people with a concussion fall, and they're recovering easily on their own. We do see half of the people that have the injury take longer than 2 weeks to recover. And then we also see a percentage of people taking longer than a month. And so that's when it's really important that you're working with a healthcare provider and you're getting healthcare as early as you can so we can help you earlier in your process. A lot of these symptoms are treatable and manageable, and so we want to help you get better along the way. So that's your first question. Also, there was a question about hitting your head again after you get a concussion the first time, or if you have a head impact and hit your head twice, right? Was that your question? So what we do, and it's across the whole United States, is we have a slogan, when in doubt, sit them out. And what that means is if someone hits their head and you think they might have a concussion, take them out of physical activity so they won't hit their head again. There's this theory called second impact syndrome, where your brain is already in that energy crisis because you hit your head and it's trying to heal itself and protect itself. And then you hit it again and now it's like exploding energy crisis. And that's where these long-term and potentially catastrophic injuries happen, where someone can die after a second impact. So that's why if you hit your head, we want to stop you from any risked behaviors where you might hit your head again if you're playing sports or if it's from riding your bike, and protect your head as it heals, and then make a clearance decision that you can go back to activities where you might hit your head again. Does that answer it? Cool. Any more concussion questions? I think we have time for one more question if there is one from the panel, or we can open it to the audience. Awesome. One more question from the audience.
Have you ever seen where someone hit their head in a concussion, does it eventually affect their behaviors, their emotions, and then their education in school?
Yes, so the question was, if someone has hit your head, have you ever seen it then affect their behaviors, emotions, and education in schools? And yes, unfortunately, that has happened. And unfortunately, a lot of the research hasn't been in place to help us along the way. But now that we're noting that in research and we're seeing how common it is, we're activating what are called return to learn profiles that help parents, teachers, school administrators identify when an injury happens, and then we can assess them and then help protect them in the future. So I think that's one of the biggest places our field can grow, is now that we know that happens, how do we help them? And that's where research is moving. So it's a really good question, and we probably don't have all the answers today, but we should be talking about this as a community. And then Ms. Priscilla has a question. Oh, okay.
What I wanted to know is, how is it for the community, our youth, and parents to understand the early childhood trauma that causes concussion, and how can we recognize that?
Yes, that is a really good question. So the question is, how can our community, including parents and youth, understand early childhood trauma and how we can recognize that? And so my biggest answer is that concussion has become a word that's common in sport. However, it doesn't just happen in sport. It can happen from anything that you hit your head or have a fast movement of your body and your head moves in a whiplash motion. So this is playing on the playground, falling off your bike. Unfortunately, domestic abuse can cause these issues. Motor vehicle accidents, motor vehicle crashes. So I think we should all be really good at recognizing what are potential signs and symptoms of concussion and then activating healthcare patterns. And so a selfish plug for that question is what we've done is develop a website, and I have a QR code in the other room that I can bring in here. The website is called concussionnavigator.org. What that tool is it's a all-encompassing educational tool for families to navigate their concussion care with confidence. And so we've partnered with organizations that are across the nation, like NASHA, the National Association of Head Injury Administrators, Brain Injury Association of Michigan, University of Michigan, and hoping to partner more with Healthy to Connections. And it's education. You want to learn more about the injury. How do I get my child back to school? Who should I talk to? Who should I put on my healthcare team? Those are all components in this website. we also have a module that is a map. And so we've identified concussion clinics across the state of Michigan. So you can put in your zip code and identify specific locations that are providers treating concussion. You can select if you're looking for, if you have speech issues, a speech and language pathologist that has experience with concussion. If you have Medicaid, Medicare insurance, you can look at them at these clinics who are taking these types of patients. And so the final module we have is a symptom tracker. And so you can set up a daily symptom monitoring tool to assess all the common concussion symptoms that you should be asking your child or that you could be reporting yourself. And then you can go and bring those to your provider and say, over the last 3 days, I've had headache, nausea, I'm really irritable, and I can't fall asleep. And then you have a record of that to just bring to your doctor's visit and say, these are the issues that I have. And so all of this is in the concussionnavigator.org that we just launched this month for Brain Injury Awareness Month. So thank you for the plug, and I think that's all the time I have. So thank you all for your questions.